Marcus Richardson's fingers hovered over the keyboard at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday in late July, the kind of Phoenix summer night when the air conditioning labored like a dying animal and the desert heat pressed against every window of the Arizona Biltmore like an unwelcome guest demanding entry. The blue glow of his dual monitors illuminated his face in the otherwise dark accounting office on the second floor of the resort's administrative wing, casting shadows that made the bags under his eyes look like bruises. He had been the senior accountant at this legendary Waldorf Astoria property for 7 years, and in that time he had reconciled millions of dollars in revenue, tracked thousands of reservations, and investigated countless billing discrepancies. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever bothered him quite like the line item that kept appearing, month after month, year after year, in the reservation system, like a ghost that refused to be exorcised. Suite 2801, the presidential suite, reserved continuously since August 15, 2003, by Helix Ventures, LLC. The payment history was immaculate. Not a single late payment in 20 years. Not one bounced check, not one declined credit card, not one request for invoice adjustments. The monthly charge was $12,500, paid automatically on the first of each month via wire transfer from an account at Desert Sun Bank in Scottsdale. Over 2 decades, that added up to exactly $3 million, paid for a suite that, according to housekeeping logs, security records, and front desk reports, had never, not even once, been occupied. Marcus rubbed his eyes with the heels of his palms, feeling the grit of exhaustion and confusion. The numbers didn't lie, but they also didn't make sense. He pulled up the corporate information for Helix Ventures, LLC again, studying the details he had already memorized. The company was registered in Delaware, a common tax haven, with a listed address in Phoenix, 4729 East McDowell Road, Suite 201. The tax ID was legitimate. The corporate status was active. Everything appeared normal on paper. But Marcus had driven past 4729 East McDowell Road 3 days ago during his lunch break. Suite 1 didn't exist. The building was a 2-story strip mall containing a nail salon, a Thai restaurant, a discount cell phone store, and several vacant units with soap-streaked windows and for lease signs sun-bleached to near illegibility. There was no Suite 201. There never had been. He had called the phone number associated with Helix Ventures 7 times over the past 2 weeks. Each time, the call connected to a generic voicemail system, the kind with a robotic female voice that said, "You have reached the voicemail box of ... double quotes, followed by a phone number, never a name, never a company greeting." Marcus had left detailed messages identifying himself, his position at the resort, and his need to verify the reservation. None of his calls had been returned. The rational part of Marcus's brain, the part that had earned him a degree in accounting from Arizona State University and passed the CPA exam on his first attempt, insisted there had to be an explanation. Maybe Helix Ventures was a holding company for a wealthy individual who valued having a guaranteed room available at one of Phoenix's most prestigious resorts. Maybe it was a tax write-off strategy he didn't understand. Maybe the corporate address was outdated and the phone number was monitored by an assistant who screened calls obsessively. But the other part of his brain, the part that had watched too many true crime documentaries and read too many investigative journalism pieces, whispered something darker. Money laundering, corporate fraud, a front for organized crime, something illegal hiding in plain sight, camouflaged by perfect credit and administrative complacency. Marcus leaned back in his ergonomic chair, which creaked under his weight, and stared at the ceiling tiles. He was 43 years old, divorced for 6 years, father to a teenage daughter he saw every other weekend, and living in a modest apartment in Tempe that smelled faintly of the curry his downstairs neighbor cooked every Sunday. His life was defined by routine: wake up, gym, work, microwave dinner, Netflix, sleep, repeat. The most exciting thing that had happened to him in the past year was getting upgraded to premium unleaded at Costco gas station by accident. And now this mystery that pulled at him like gravity, that made his pulse quicken every time he opened the accounting software, that invaded his thoughts during his daughter's soccer games and his solitary dinners and his 2 a.m. insomniac stares at his bedroom ceiling. If you've ever felt that gnawing sensation that something isn't right, that underneath the surface of normalcy something terrible and fascinating lurks, then you understand exactly what Marcus was experiencing. And if this story resonates with you, please subscribe to this channel and like this video. It helps us bring more real, impactful stories to people who need to hear them. Now back to Marcus and the mystery that was about to consume his entire existence. The decision formed in his mind with the sudden clarity of a thunderclap in the desert. He was going to enter Suite 2801. He was going to see for himself what 20 years and $3 million had been paying for. Marcus glanced at the clock. 11:53 p.m. The night shift at the front desk consisted of one clerk, usually either Ramon or Yolanda, and a security guard who made rounds every 45 minutes. The resort had 738 rooms across multiple buildings and casitas spread over 39 acres of immaculately landscaped grounds. The main tower, where Suite 2801 was located, would be quiet at this hour. Most guests would be asleep. The hallways would be empty. He powered down his computer, the monitors fading to black and leaving him in sudden darkness, broken only by the amber glow of the emergency exit sign above the door. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his master keycard, privilege afforded to senior administrative staff for emergency access, and felt its weight in his palm. The plastic was warm from being in his wallet all day. He stood, his legs stiff from hours of sitting, and walked to the door. His reflection in the dark window showed a man who looked simultaneously determined and terrified, his short cropped hair slightly disheveled, his loosened tie hanging like a noose around his neck. The administrative building connected to the main tower via a covered walkway lined with barrel cacti and agave plants that looked silver in the landscape lighting. Marcus's footsteps echoed too loudly on the terracotta tiles, each step a small betrayal of his presence. The night air was still brutally hot, probably 95 degrees, even at midnight, and it wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket. Sweat immediately began to form at his hairline and between his shoulder blades, soaking into his light blue dress shirt. He entered the main tower through the employee entrance, swiping his keycard and hearing the electronic lock click open with a sound that seemed deafening in the silence. The service corridor was dimly lit, with motion-activated lights that flickered on as he moved through, creating a stuttering pathway of illumination. The walls were plain white drywall, stripped of the luxury finishes that guests saw, exposing the utilitarian skeleton of the building. He could hear the mechanical hum of the HVAC system, the distant clank of ice machines, the barely perceptible whisper of water moving through pipes. Marcus reached the service elevator and pressed the call button. The wait felt eternal. His reflection in the polished brass doors showed a man who looked like he was about to commit a crime, which he supposed he was. Unauthorized entry into a guest room, even one paid for and apparently abandoned, was grounds for immediate termination. He could lose his job, his career. The child support payments he was already struggling to maintain would become impossible. But he couldn't stop. The compulsion was too strong, the mystery too consuming. The elevator arrived with a soft chime that made him flinch. The doors slid open, revealing an empty car with mirrored walls and soft lighting that made him look jaundiced and sick. He stepped inside and pressed the button for the 28th floor, the highest level of the tower, reserved exclusively for premium suites. The elevator began its ascent, and Marcus watched the floor numbers climb on the digital display above the door. 5, 10, 15, 20. Each number brought a fresh wave of adrenaline that made his mouth dry and his palms slick with sweat. At the 25th floor, the elevator slowed unexpectedly and stopped. Marcus's heart seized in his chest, hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. The doors began to open, and he instinctively pressed himself against the back wall, as if he could somehow become invisible. An elderly couple entered, he in striped pajamas under a resort bathrobe, she in a silk nightgown with a matching robe, both looking exhausted and slightly annoyed. The man was carrying an ice bucket, empty. They didn't even glance at Marcus, lost in their own world of late-night ice runs and marital familiarity. The woman pressed the button for the 26th floor, and they stood in silence as the elevator resumed its climb. Marcus could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral that clashed with his own nervous sweat. The 10-second ride felt like an hour. The doors opened at 26, and the couple shuffled out without a word or backward glance. The doors closed again. Marcus released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his entire body trembling with the aftershock of fear and relief. 27th floor, 28th floor. The doors opened onto a corridor that looked like it belonged in a different universe from the service areas Marcus had just traveled through. The carpet was thick and patterned with Art Deco geometric designs in cream, gold, and burgundy. The walls were covered in textured wallpaper that caught the light from crystal sconces spaced every 15 feet. Original artwork landscapes of the Arizona desert painted in the 1930s. When the resort was first built, hung in gilded frames. The air smelled of fresh flowers and expensive cleaning products. A carefully maintained atmosphere of luxury and exclusivity. Suite 2801 was at the end of the corridor, isolated from the other rooms by its position in the corner of the building. Marcus walked toward it slowly, his footsteps muffled by the plush carpet, his breathing loud in his own ears. With each step, his sense of crossing a threshold grew stronger, not just a physical threshold, but a metaphysical one, a boundary between his normal, predictable life and something unknown and potentially dangerous. He reached the door. It was massive at feet tall, made of dark mahogany with brass fixtures that gleamed under the corridor lighting. A small brass plaque read Presidential Suite 2801 in elegant engraved letters. There was no Do Not Disturb sign, no room service tray waiting to be collected, no sound from within, just silence, heavy and complete, like the suite itself was holding its breath. Marcus pulled out his master key card. His hand was shaking so badly it took 3 attempts to align the card with the reader. The lock mechanism beeped once, twice, 3 times, and then clicked open with a mechanical thunk that sounded like a vault unsealing. He grasped the handle, cold brass against his sweaty palm, and turned it. The door swung inward with a whisper of oiled hinges, revealing darkness beyond. The smell hit him first. Not decay, not mustiness, but something stranger, the complete absence of smell. No air freshener, no human scent, no trace of occupancy. It was the smell of a space hermetically sealed from life, preserved in amber, frozen in time. The air temperature was exactly 72 degrees, maintained perfectly by the climate control system that had run continuously for 2 decades. Marcus reached around the door frame and found the light switch. He flipped it up, and recessed lighting bloomed throughout the suite, revealing what $3 million had been protecting. The presidential suite was enormous nightly. 2,500 square feet of luxury accommodations spread across an open-concept living area, separate dining room, full kitchen, master bedrooms, and 3 bathrooms. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined the western wall, offering what should have been a spectacular view of the Phoenix skyline and the desert mountains beyond. But the curtains were drawn, heavy blackout drapes in deep burgundy velvet that looked like they hadn't been opened in years. The fabric was faded along the edges where sunlight had seeped through the gaps, creating ghostly outlines. The furniture was pristine. A cream-colored leather sofa faced a gas fireplace that had never been lit. A grand piano, a baby grand Steinway, in polished black, sat in the corner. Its lid closed, a thin layer of dust on its surface, suggesting the monthly cleaning was perhaps not as thorough as it should have been. The dining table was set for 8, with fine china and crystal that had never held food or wine. Everything looked like a museum exhibit, perfectly arranged, completely lifeless. Marcus stepped fully into the suite, letting the door swing closed behind him with a soft click that made him jump. He moved through the living area slowly, his accountant's brain automatically calculating the value of everything he saw. The artwork on the walls, probably $30,000 per piece. The custom furniture, $200,000 Italy. The entertainment system, $15,000. The silk rug under the coffee table, $40,000. The suite itself represented millions in design and construction, maintained empty and unused for 20 years. Why? The question pounded in his head like a drumbeat. Why? He walked to the master bedroom, passing through a doorway flanked by built-in bookshelves filled with leather-bound classics that had probably never been opened. The bedroom was dominated by a California king bed with an upholstered headboard in champagne-colored silk. The bed was made with military precision corners, hospital crisp, pillows arranged symmetrically, a decorative throw folded at the foot. The bedspread showed no indentation, no sign that anyone had ever sat on it, let alone slept in it. But on the bedside table, Marcus saw something that made his breath catch. A telephone. Not the standard resort room phone. This was different. It was an older model, beige plastic, with a rotary dial, completely out of place in the luxury suite. The handset rested in its cradle, but Marcus noticed immediately that the cord wasn't plugged into the wall jack. The phone was disconnected, dead, a prop. He moved to the desk, positioned near the bedroom window, antique writing desk in cherrywood, with brass pulls on the drawers. The desk surface was empty, except for a single item placed precisely in the center, a letter. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy stock, expensive. It was sealed with red wax that had been stamped with an intricate designer spiral pattern that looked like a DNA helix, and written across the front in elegant, cursive handwriting done with black ink. And it was a single name, Marcus Richardson. The world tilted. Marcus grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself, his vision swimming, his heart now beating so fast it felt like a continuous vibration rather than individual beats. The letter was addressed to him personally, not to whom it may concern, not current management. His name, his actual name. Impossible. This had to be impossible. The suite had been sealed for 20 years. The letter had clearly been here for some time. There was dust around it, suggesting it had been placed here long ago. How could someone have known, 2 decades earlier, that Marcus Richardson would be the one to investigate this mystery? How could they have predicted his name, his position, his inevitable curiosity? His hands shook violently as he reached for the envelope. The paper felt expensive, textured, slightly rough against his fingertips. The wax seal was thick, about a quarter-inch raised from the paper, solid and unbroken. He turned the envelope over, looking for any other writing, any clue, but there was nothing else. Marcus's rational mind screamed at him to leave, to exit the suite immediately, to report this to hotel security and management and let them handle it. But his hands, operating on some deeper instinct, some compulsion stronger than reason, were already breaking the seal. The wax cracked with a satisfying snap, pieces falling onto the desk like drops of frozen blood. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, folded twice, the same heavy stock, the same quality. Marcus unfolded it with trembling fingers, the paper crackling slightly in the absolute silence of the suite. The handwriting was the same elegant cursive black ink that had faded slightly to dark brown at the edges. The letter was dated August 15th, 2003, exactly 20 years ago to the day. It read, "Dear Marcus Richardson, if you are reading this, then my plan has worked exactly as I designed it. You are curious, of course you are. You are an accountant, trained to notice patterns, to investigate discrepancies, to ask questions when numbers don't align with reality. I knew someone like you would eventually come. I've been waiting for you for 20 years. My name is Elliot James Carver. You won't recognize it, but you should. 20 years ago, I was the CEO of Helix Ventures LLC, a corporation that existed only on paper but wielded more power than you can imagine. I was also, though few knew it, the architect of one of the largest bribery and money laundering schemes in Arizona history. Millions of dollars flowed through Helix Ventures, dirty money from construction kickbacks, political payoffs, judicial bribes, corporate embezzlement. I facilitated it all. I made it clean. I made it disappear. And then, in July 2003, it all collapsed. Federal investigators were closing in. Witnesses were turning. My associates were preparing to sacrifice me to save themselves. So I did what any rational man would do. I disappeared. I took enough money to survive. I created a new identity, and I vanished into a life so ordinary that no one would ever find me. But I couldn't vanish completely. I couldn't bear the thought of erasing myself entirely from the world, of leaving no trace, no proof that I had existed. This suite became my anchor. As long as I kept paying for it, as long as money flowed from Helix Ventures to the Arizona Biltmore, I knew I still existed in some form. Each payment was a heartbeat. Each month that passed without discovery was a breath. I am writing this letter in my new apartment in Flagstaff, where I work as a librarian, a job I chose specifically for its anonymity and invisibility. I am 47 years old. I am tired. I am scared. And I am, above all else, guilty. In the master bedroom closet of this suite, behind the false panel in the back wall, you will find 21 boxes. One for each year. I have planned to keep this suite reserved. Each box contains letters. I have written confessions, really. Detailed accounts of every crime I committed or facilitated. Names, dates, amounts, methods. A complete record of 20 years of corruption. I will write one letter per year on August 15th, the anniversary of when I signed the original reservation contract for this suite. And on the year I die, or the year I am discovered, the letters will stop, and someone like you will find them. Why am I doing this? Because the guilt is eating me alive. Because the people I helped destroyed lives and I did nothing to stop it. Because I want to believe that somewhere, in some version of the future, justice exists. Because this suite, this empty, expensive, ridiculous suite, is my confessional, And you, Marcus Richardson, are my priest. The truth is in the closet. What you do with it will define who you are. Elliot James Carver, August 15th, 2003. Marcus read the letter 3 times, his hands trembling so badly the paper rustled like leaves in wind. His mind raced, trying to process the implications of what he had just read. This wasn't just an accounting discrepancy. This was a confession to major crimes. This was evidence. This was dynamite. He moved to the master bedroom closet on legs that felt numb and disconnected from his body. The closet was a walk-in, larger than his apartment's bedroom, with built-in shelving and hanging rods on 3 sides. It was empty, no clothes, no shoes, no luggage. Just empty wooden hangers on the rods, casting strange shadows in the overhead lighting. Marcus ran his hands along the back wall, feeling for any irregularity. The wall was covered in the same champagne-colored fabric as the headboard, stretched taut over what he assumed was drywall. He pressed against it at various points, searching for there. In the bottom left corner, the fabric gave slightly under his fingers. He pressed harder, and he heard a soft click. A section of the wallet, about 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall, swung inward on concealed hinges, revealing a hidden compartment behind the false wall. Inside were exactly what Elliot had promised: 21 cardboard boxes, each about the size of a shoebox, stacked neatly in rows. Each box was labeled with a year: 2004, 2005, 2006, and so on, up to 2024. Marcus pulled out the box labeled 2004, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He set it on the closet floor and opened the lid. Inside was a letter, same heavy stock paper, same elegant handwriting. The date was August 15th, 2004, exactly 1 year after the first letter. Marcus began to read. Dear Marcus, or whoever finds this, it has been 1 year. 1 year of waking up in a different life, working a different job, being a different person. 1 year of looking over my shoulder everywhere I go. 1 year of nightmares about federal agents knocking on my door. 1 year of knowing that I destroyed lives and walked away free. Today I will tell you about Judge Patricia Holbrook. In 1998, she was struggling financially: bad investments, expensive divorce, crushing debt. Victor Salazar, a developer I worked with, needed a favorable ruling on a zoning dispute that would have blocked his $200 million mixed-use development project. I arranged for a payment of $350,000 to be made to Judge Holbrook through a series of shell companies. She ruled in favor of Salazar. The project was built. Hundreds of low-income families who lived on that land were displaced. Judge Holbrook paid off her debts. Victor became even wealthier, and I took my percentage. Judge Holbrook is still on the bench today. She has no idea that I have documented everything: the shell companies I created, the bank account numbers, the wire transfer records, the dates of our meetings. It's all here in this box, waiting for someone to care enough to look. I am 58 years old now. I have a girlfriend who knows nothing about my past. We go hiking on weekends. We cook dinner together. We talk about maybe getting a dog. Sometimes I forget for hours at a time what I did. And then I remember, and the guilt comes back like a wave that knocks me underwater. Next year, I will tell you about Senator David Krause and the highway contract that should never have been awarded. Elliot, August 15th, 2004. Marcus's hands were numb. He opened the 2005 box. The letter detailed a bribing scheme involving a state senator. He opened 2006, a fraud case involving a medical equipment supplier and Medicare billing. 2007, embezzlement from a non-profit. 2008, manipulation of construction bids for public schools. Year after year after year, each letter meticulously detailing crimes involving recognizable names, judges, politicians, business leaders, people Marcus had seen on the news, read about in newspapers, people who were still in power. He lost track of time. He sat on the closet floor, surrounded by open boxes, reading letter after letter. Elliot's handwriting changed slightly over the years, becoming shakier, less confident, the words sometimes blotted as though he had been crying while writing. The tone changed too, becoming more desperate, more remorseful, more human. The letter dated August 15, 2020, mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic, described Elliot's isolation, his fear that he would die of the virus before completing his confession. The 2021 letter was shorter, mentioned health problems. The doctors say it's cancer, lungs, stage 3. And then Marcus reached the box, labeled 2024, this year, 3 months ago, in August. His hands trembled as he opened it. The handwriting was barely legible, shaking and weak. The ink was smudged in places. The letter was only half a page. Dear Marcus, I know it's you. I've been following the resort's staff directory online. Saw you were promoted to a senior accountant last year. Knew you would be the one to find this. I am dying. The cancer has spread everywhere. Brain, bones, liver. The doctors give me weeks, maybe days. I am 64 years old, and I am writing this from a hospice in Sedona. I am not sorry. I am dying. I am sorry I lived so long in cowardice. Everything I have written is true. Every name, every crime, every detail. I have spent 20 years maintaining Helix Ventures, moving money between accounts, keeping the corporate registration active, paying for this suite just so this confession could exist, just so someone would eventually care enough to look. In Desert Sun Bank in Scottsdale, in a safe deposit box registered to Helix Ventures LLC, there is physical evidence to support every claim I've made. Documents, photographs, recordings. The key to that safe deposit box is in this suite, taped to the underside of the disconnected telephone on the bedside table. When my letters stop, when the August 2025 payment fails to go through, you will know I am dead. And then the truth can begin. I was never brave enough to come forward while I was alive, but maybe through you, I can be brave in death. Do the right thing, Marcus. Be the man I never was. Elliot James Carver. August 15th, 2024. Marcus's vision blurred with tears. He wasn't crying for Elliot exactly. The man was a criminal, a coward who had facilitated corruption for profit. But there was something devastatingly human about this confession, about a life spent carrying unbearable guilt, about choosing such a strange, lonely, expensive way to try to make things right. Marcus stood on shaking legs and walked back to the bedroom. He picked up the disconnected telephone, turned it over, and felt along the underside of the base. His fingers found a small metal object taped to the plastic key. He peeled it away carefully, the old tape releasing with difficulty. The key was brass, small, with a number stamped on it. 2847, safe deposit box number 2847, at Desert Sun Bank. Marcus looked around the suite that had been Elliot Carver's monument to his own guilt. $3 million spent to maintain a confessional booth. 20 years of payments, each one a heartbeat of a ghost. And now that ghost was dead or dying and had left. Marcus, holding the detonator to a bomb that could destroy some of the most powerful people in Arizona. He thought about his daughter, about his precarious finances, about the comfortable mediocrity of his life. He thought about how easy it would be to walk away right now, to reseal the closet, to take the letters and destroy them, to pretend he had never been here. No one would ever know. Elliot would die with his secrets. The powerful would remain powerful. Marcus would remain safe. But he also thought about Judge Patricia Holbrook, who had taken bribes and displaced hundreds of families, about Senator David Krause, who had profited from rigged highway contracts, about every victim of every crime detailed in those 21 boxes of letters, about the fact that justice wasn't just an abstract concept, it was a choice made by individuals in moments exactly like this one. Marcus carefully gathered all 21 boxes, stacking them in his arms. They were heavy, both physically and metaphorically, the weight of 2 decades of corruption pressed into cardboard and paper. He carried them out of the closet, through the bedroom, into the living area. He set them on the dining table that had never been used, arranging them in chronological order. Then he pulled out his phone and stood in the middle of the Presidential Suite 2801, surrounded by the evidence of Elliot Carver's crimes and conscience, and he made the call that would change everything. FBI Phoenix Field Office, how may I direct your call? Marcus took a deep breath, squeezed the brass key in his left hand until his palm hurt, and said, "My name is Marcus Richardson. I need to speak to someone in the white-collar crime division. I have evidence of a 20-year corruption scheme involving judges, politicians, and business leaders in Arizona, and I need someone to come to the Arizona Biltmore right now, before I lose my courage." The next 47 minutes stretched into an eternity of nauseating anticipation. Marcus remained standing in the center of Suite 2801, his phone still in his hand, his body rigid with a combination of terror and exhilaration that made his muscles ache. He had crossed a line from which there was no return. The woman on the phone had asked him to stay exactly where he was, to touch nothing else, to wait. Federal agents were en route. Marcus looked down at his hands and noticed they were still shaking, a continuous tremor that started in his fingers and radiated up through his forearms. His dress shirt was soaked through with sweat, the fabric clinging to his back and chest like a second skin. The air conditioning in the suite hummed efficiently, maintaining that perfect 72 degrees, but Marcus felt feverish, his face flushed and hot, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He walked to one of the floor-to-ceiling windows and pulled back a section of the heavy burgundy curtain. The movement released a small cloud of dust that caught in the recessed lighting like glitter, and Marcus coughed reflexively. Through the window, Phoenix sprawled below him in a vast grid of lights as streetlights marking roads, the red and white trails of cars on the freeway, the illuminated windows of office buildings where other insomniacs worked through the night, the dark patches where desert parks interrupted the urban sprawl. Somewhere down there, FBI agents were racing toward the resort. Somewhere down there, people were sleeping peacefully, unaware that by morning, the entire political and business landscape of Arizona might be irrevocably changed. Marcus let the curtain fall back into place, sealing himself once again in the hermetic environment of the suite. He walked to the dining table and looked at the 21 boxes arranged in their chronological a timeline of corruption stretching across 2 decades. Each box represented a year of Elliot Carver's self-imposed penance, a year of guilty conscience manifesting as elegant handwriting on expensive paper. Marcus opened the box, labeled 2015, almost without thinking, driven by a morbid curiosity to know more. The letter inside detailed a scheme involving the Arizona Department of Transportation, a $180 million highway expansion project that had been awarded to a construction company called Pinnacle Infrastructure after a rigged bidding process. Elliot described how he had created fake subcontractor quotes, inflated cost estimates, and facilitated bribes to 3 members of the State Transportation Board. The project had gone forward, the highway had been built, and the taxpayers of Arizona had been overcharged by approximately $40 million, money that had been funneled through shell companies to the pockets of executives and officials whose names Elliot listed with clinical precision. Marcus was reading about a secondary bribe to an environmental compliance officer when he heard voices in the corridor outside. His head snapped up, his heart rate immediately spiking. He moved quickly to the door, pressing his ear against the solid mahogany, straining to hear. The 28th floor, Suite 2801. That was Ramon's voice. The night desk clerk, sounding nervous and confused. "Thank you, we'll take it from here." A different voice, male, authoritative, clipped with professional efficiency. "Sir, I need to inform you that this suite is..." Ramon, again, trying to assert some kind of protocol. "Sir, we understand. Please return to your station." A woman's voice this time, polite, but absolutely brooking no argument. Marcus heard the electronic beep of a keycard. They must have gotten a master key from the front desk, and then the door handle began to turn. He stepped back quickly, nearly tripping over his own feet, his throat tight with anxiety. The door opened to reveal 4 people. 2 men and 1 woman were dressed in dark suits. Despite the late hour, their expressions serious and alert. The 4th person was a uniformed Phoenix police officer, there presumably to coordinate with local law enforcement. The woman in front held up a leather credentials case, displaying a gold FBI badge and photo identification. "Richardson, I'm Special Agent Lisa Choane with the FBI's Phoenix office. These are Special Agents Michael Torres and James Whitaker, and Officer Ramirez from Phoenix PD. May we come in?" Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. He stepped aside, and the 4 law enforcement officers entered Suite 2801, their eyes immediately scanning the space with the practiced efficiency of people trained to assess environments for threats and evidence. Agent Chan's gaze landed on the dining table with its neat row of boxes, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition that this was going to be bigger than a routine call. "Mr. Richardson, you said on the phone that you have evidence of a corruption scheme." Agent Choane's voice was measured, giving nothing away. "Can you walk us through what you found?" And so Marcus told them. He started with the accounting discrepancy that had first caught his attention. The suite reserved for 20 years, never occupied, always paid for. He described his investigation, his discovery of the fake corporate address, the unanswered phone calls. He explained how he had used his master key card to enter the suite, admitting to what was technically unauthorized access. Though none of the agents seemed particularly concerned about that detail under the circumstances. He showed them the first letter addressed to him personally, watching their faces as they read Elliot Carver's confession. He opened a hidden compartment in the closet, demonstrated how the false panel worked, and finally, he showed them the boxes on the dining table, opening several at random so they could read the detailed confessions inside. Agent Chun read the 2004 letter about Judge Holbrook twice, her expression hardening with each pass. Agent Torres photographed several of the letters with his phone, presumably sending them to someone at the FBI office. Agent Whitaker made a call, speaking in low, urgent tones about securing warrants and waking up an assistant U.S. attorney. "Mr. Richardson," Agent Chun said finally, looking up from a letter dated 2011 that detailed campaign finance fraud, "you understand the magnitude of what you've given us?" Marcus nodded. His voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "I think so. These letters, if they're accurate, implicate some of the most powerful people in Arizona: judges, state senators, federal contractors, corporate executives. We're talking about RICO charges, bribery, money laundering, fraud. This is ... double quotes. She paused, seeming to search for the right word. This is going to be one of the largest corruption investigations in state history. Elliot mentioned something else, Marcus said, pulling the brass key from his pocket. He said, there's a safe deposit box at Desert Sun Bank in Scottsdale, number 2847. He said there's physical evidence inside, documents, photographs, recordings that support everything in the letters. Agent Chun took the key carefully, holding it by the edges as though it might be evidence itself. She turned it over, examining the stamped number. We'll need to get a warrant for the box. That'll take a few hours. Mr. Richardson, I need to ask, did you remove anything from this suite? Did you touch or alter anything other than what you've already described? No, ma'am. Just the letters and the key. Everything else is exactly as I found it. Good. This suite is now a federal crime scene. Officer Ramirez, can you secure the door? No one enters or leaves without my authorization. Torres, call forensics. I want this place processed completely. Whitaker, contact Desert Sun Bank Security and let them know we'll be executing a warrant on box 2847 as soon as we have the paperwork. And someone find out everything there is to know about Elliot James Carver, where he is, whether he's still alive, his current legal status. The next several hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. The suite filled with FBI personnel, forensic technicians who photographed every surface, evidence specialists who carefully documented and bagged each of the 21 boxes, fingerprint analysts who dusted surfaces Marcus had touched. Agent Chun set up a command post in the suite's living area, her laptop open on the coffee table, her phone pressed to her ear for what seemed like continuous conversations with superiors and other agents. Marcus was moved to one of the smaller bedrooms in the suite and interviewed formally by Agent Whitaker, methodical recounting of everything he had already explained, but recorded this time, official and permanent. Marcus signed statements. He provided his phone, his keycard, his written permission for the FBI to access his work computer, and emails to verify his version of events. At 4:17 a.m., Agent Torres returned from a computer search with information about Elliot Carver. Found him, Torres announced, reading from his phone. Elliot James Carver disappeared in July 2003 after being named as a person of interest in a federal money laundering investigation. Case went cold. In 2004, he was legally declared missing but never presumed dead. No confirmed sightings. No financial activity under his real name. And here's the kicker. There's a notation in the file from 2006 that the investigation was closed due to lack of evidence and prosecutorial discretion. Someone at the U.S. Attorney's Office decided not to pursue it. Agent Chun's jaw tightened. Who made that decision? Torres scrolled through his phone. Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Moss. He's retired now, living in Tucson. Add him to the list, Chun said grimly. If Carver's letters are accurate, Moss was probably paid off or pressured to drop the case. Torres, see if you can find Carver's current identity. If he reinvented himself, there has to be a trail somewhere. Check librarians in Flagstaff. His 2003 letter mentioned working at a library. And someone contact every hospice facility in Sedona. If he wrote his last letter 3 months ago from hospice, he might still be there, or they'll have records of what happened to him. Marcus sat in the bedroom, listening to all of this through the open door, feeling increasingly surreal. Less than 5 hours ago, he had been a middle-aged accountant working late in a quiet office, wrestling with a minor mystery. Now, he was at the center of a federal investigation that seemed to grow larger and more consequential with each passing minute. At 6:43 a.m., just as the first light of dawn began to soften the darkness outside the suite's windows, Agent Torres received a call. Marcus watched the agent's face change as he listened, saw something like sadness or respect flicker across his features. Torres lowered his phone. Found him. Elliot James Carver has been living in Flagstaff since 2004 under the name Edward Collins. Worked at the Flagstaff Public Library for 19 years as a reference librarian. Retired in 2023 due to illness. He was admitted to Sedona Vista Hospice on June 12th of this year with metastatic lung cancer. He died there on August 22nd, 2024, exactly 1 week after he wrote his final letter. The hospice has his belongings in storage, pending notification of next of kin, but they say there is no next of kin listed. The room fell silent. Even Agent Chun, who had maintained professional detachment throughout the night, seemed affected by this news. Elliot Carver, criminal, coward, confessant, had died without family, without anyone to mourn him, his real identity unknown even to the people who cared for him in his final days. His only legacy was this suite, these letters, this carefully constructed confession. He planned it perfectly, Marcus heard himself say, his voice sounding distant and hollow. He knew exactly when he would die. He wrote his last letter in August, paid the final month's fee, and then he let go. He knew the September payment wouldn't go through. He knew that would be the trigger for someone to investigate. Agent Chun nodded slowly. The man spent 20 years of his life and $3 million creating a dead man's switch. It's ... double quotes, she trailed off, unable or unwilling to complete the thought. At 9:15 a.m., a federal magistrate, judge roused from sleep and extremely displeased about it, signed the warrant for safe deposit box 2847 at Desert Sun Bank. By 10 a.m., Marcus found himself part of a convoy of 3 FBI vehicles traveling from the resort to the bank in Scottsdale. The morning rush hour traffic parting before the flashing lights like water before a ship's prow. Desert Sun Bank was a regional institution with only 6 branches, all in the Phoenix metropolitan area. The Scottsdale location was in a 2-story stucco building with tinted windows and desert landscaping that looked brown and dying in the brutal summer heat. The bank manager of nervous men in his 50s named Gerald, who kept touching his tie as though it was strangling him, met them in the lobby. The warrant already reviewed by the bank's legal department. The box was opened only once since it was registered in 2003, Gerald explained as he led them down to the vault in the basement. Mr. Carve, or whoever set up the account, came in personally on August 20th, 2003, deposited contents, and never returned. The annual fees are being paid automatically via the same wire transfer system that paid for the hotel suite. The vault was a windowless room with walls lined with safe deposit boxes in various sizes. Box 2847 was in the middle section, a large double-width unit. Gerald used the bank's master key, while Agent Chun used Elliot's key. Both turned simultaneously, and the box slid free from its slot. It was heavy. Agent Torres had to help carry it to a private examination room the bank provided. Marcus stood in the corner of that small room, watching as the FBI agents opened the box, and for the second time in less than 12 hours, he witnessed the unveiling of Elliot Carver's methodically preserved evidence of corruption. The box contained 9 large accordion folders, each labeled with names: Judge Patricia Holbrook, Senator David Krause, Commissioner William Sharp. The list went on. Names Marcus recognized from newspapers, from television news, from political advertisements. People who wielded power, who made decisions affecting millions of lives, who projected images of integrity and public service. Inside the folders were documents that systematically destroyed those images. Bank statements showing unexplained deposits, photographs of meetings that should never have happened, a judge dining with a developer whose case was pending in her court, a senator shaking hands with a corporate executive in what was clearly a hotel room, time-stamped and location-stamped. Audio recordings on small cassette tapes, labeled with dates and brief descriptions. Holbrook agrees to zoning change. The 4th of November, 1998. Krause confirms highway vote. March 22, 2001. Sharp takes envelope. July 15, 2005. Agent Chan's hands were shaking slightly as she sifted through the contents of the Judge Holbrook folder. This is ... I've never seen anything like this. It's complete, it's airtight. Every claim in his letters is backed up by physical evidence. Bank records, photographs, recordings. He documented everything. Every crime he committed or facilitated, he documented. Why? Marcus asked, unable to stay silent. Why would a criminal create such a perfect record of his own crimes? Agent Chun looked up at him, and for the first time, her professional mask slipped enough for Marcus to see the human underneath someone who was simultaneously appalled and awed by what they were uncovering. Guilt, she said simply. Conscience. The need to believe that justice would eventually matter. Maybe he couldn't face prosecution himself, but he could make sure that one day these people would face consequences for what they'd done. He built a time bomb and set it to go off after his death. Over the following 3 weeks, Marcus Richardson's ordinary life dissolved completely, replaced by something he could never have imagined. He was placed under federal protection, not because he was in danger, necessarily, but because the FBI wanted to control information flow and prevent any potential intimidation or interference. He was moved to a hotel in Tempe, different from the Biltmore, anonymous and functional. He couldn't go to work. He couldn't see his daughter, though he was allowed supervised phone calls. He spent hours each day in FBI offices, being debriefed, reviewing documents, providing testimony to federal grand juries. The investigation exploded outward like a shockwave. The contents of Elliot Carver's letters and safe deposit box resulted in the issuance of 63 federal warrants and indictments. Judge Patricia Holbrook was arrested at her home at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, led away in handcuffs while news cameras captured every moment. Senator David Krause resigned his seat and surrendered to federal marshals, his attorney already negotiating a plea deal. Commissioner William Sharp attempted to flee to Mexico and was apprehended at the border. 4 sitting Arizona state legislators were indicted. 3 federal contractors saw their offices raided simultaneously. 2 bank executives were arrested for money laundering. The media coverage was relentless and apocalyptic. Biggest political corruption scandal in Arizona history, proclaimed the Arizona Republic. 2 decades of bribery exposed in hotel suite. Confession, reported CNN. The ghost in suite 2801. How a dead man's letters brought down Arizona's elite, read the headline in the New York Times. Marcus watched all of this from his anonymous hotel room, feeling disconnected from reality. His name was kept out of the press initially. Federal prosecutors wanted to protect their key witness, but he knew that anonymity couldn't last forever. And indeed, after 2 weeks, someone leaked his identity. His phone exploded with calls from reporters, lawyers, documentary producers. His ex-wife called, concerned and confused. His daughter texted him, "Dad, are you the guy from the hotel? Are you famous?" Famous. The word felt absurd. Marcus wasn't famous. He was a 43-year-old accountant who had followed a hunch and stumbled into something vastly bigger than himself. He hadn't set out to be a hero. He hadn't even set out to expose corruption. He had simply wanted to understand an accounting discrepancy. And now people were calling him courageous, principled, a champion of justice. On a Friday afternoon in late September, nearly 6 weeks after he had first entered Suite 2801, Marcus was summoned to the FBI Phoenix office for a meeting with Agent Chun and the U.S. Attorney for Arizona, a severe woman in her 60s, named Margaret Dalton. They met in a conference room with a view of downtown Phoenix, the city sprawling under a sky bleached white by heat and sun. "Mr. Richardson, U.S. Attorney Dalton began, her hands folded on the table in front of her. "I want to personally thank you for your cooperation in this investigation. Your decision to contact the FBI and your willingness to serve as a witness has been instrumental in what I believe will be the most significant corruption prosecution in this state's history. Because of you, justice is being served." Marcus nodded, unsure what to say. The praise made him uncomfortable, as though he was accepting credit for something he didn't fully deserve. "However," Dalton continued, "we need to discuss your future. The trials resulting from this investigation will likely take 2 to 3 years to work through the system. You will be called to testify multiple times. Your identity is now public, and, unfortunately, the Arizona Biltmore has informed us that they've placed you on administrative leave pending an internal review of your unauthorized access to Suite 2801. Marcus's stomach dropped. He had expected this, but hearing it stated so plainly still hit like a physical blow. "They're firing me." "Not yet," Agent Chun interjected. "But realistically, yes, that's probably where this is headed. You violated hotel policy, even if you did so for the right reasons. And the resort is concerned about legal liability if any of the people being prosecuted claim that evidence was obtained improperly. The hotel doesn't want to be implicated. So what am I supposed to do?" Marcus heard the edge of panic in his own voice. "I have child support payments. I have rent. We have a proposal," Dalton interrupted gently. "The federal government has a victim compensation fund and witness protection resources. While you're not technically a victim, and you don't need protection in the traditional sense, we can arrange a settlement that would provide you with financial stability while the trials proceed. Additionally, several advocacy organizations focused on anti-corruption have expressed interest in hiring you as a consultant or spokesperson. You've become something of a symbol, Mr. Richardson, the ordinary person who chose to do the right thing despite the cost." Marcus looked out the window at the Phoenix skyline. Somewhere down there was the Arizona Biltmore, with its Art Deco elegance and its dark secrets now exposed. Somewhere was Suite 2801, probably sealed as evidence, its 20-year mystery finally solved, and, somewhere, a crematorium, or scattered across the northern Arizona mountains he had loved, were the ashes of Elliot James Carver, the man who had orchestrated all of this from beyond the grave. "What happened to his body?" Marcus asked suddenly. "Elliot's body. Did anyone claim it?" Agent Chun shook her head. "No next of kin, no family. He was cremated as Edward Collins, the name he'd lived under for 20 years. The hospice staff said he was quiet, kept to himself, read constantly. They had no idea who he really was. He died alone," Marcus said softly. "Completely alone. No one at his bedside. No one to mourn him. Just a fake name and a library card." "He made his choices," Dalton said, not unkindly. "He spent 20 years running from consequences. That's a particular kind of hell. But in the end, he chose to make it right," Marcus countered. "He could have taken his secrets to the grave. He could have protected the people he worked with. Instead, he spent 2 decades and $3 million building a confession. He chose justice, even if he wasn't brave enough to face it personally. Dalton studied Marcus for a long moment. "Is that why you went into that suite, Mr. Richardson? Is that why you called the FBI instead of walking away? Because you believed in justice?" Marcus thought about that night, the fear, the adrenaline, the moment he had held Elliot's first letter and felt the weight of the decision ahead of him. He thought about how easy it would have been to leave, to pretend he had never found anything, to preserve his safe, predictable life. "I don't know," he admitted. "I think I just couldn't live with myself if I walked away. I kept thinking about all the people hurt by these crimes. Families displaced by rigged zoning decisions, taxpayers cheated by fraudulent contracts, the whole system corrupted. And I thought, if I don't do this, if I destroy those letters and pretend I never saw them, they aren't part of it. I'm complicit. Even if I gain nothing from the corruption, my silence makes me part of it." Dalton nodded slowly, something like respect in her expression. "That, Mr. Richardson, is exactly the kind of thinking we need more of. Which brings me to my actual proposal. I'd like to offer you a position as a special consultant to the U.S. Attorney's Office. You'd work with our Financial Crimes Division, helping to investigate complex white-collar cases, bringing your accountant's eye to follow money trails and detect irregularities. The pay would be comparable to your previous salary, plus federal benefits. And it would give you purpose during this transition, a way to turn what you've discovered into something larger." Marcus stared at her, stunned. "You want to hire me to investigate financial crimes? You've already demonstrated the exact skills and integrity we need. You notice patterns, you ask questions, you follow through, and most importantly, you choose truth over convenience. Those are rare qualities, Mr. Richardson." Over the next 18 months, Marcus Richardson became someone he never imagined he could be. He accepted Dalton's offer and found himself working in federal offices, analyzing complex financial documents, helping prosecutors understand money trails and corporate shell games. He testified in 7 separate trials. His detailed recounting of the night he found Elliot's letters becoming a crucial part of the prosecution's narrative. He watched as Judge Holbrook was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. He was present when Senator Krause pleaded guilty and received an 8-year sentence. He saw executives and officials who had seemed untouchable led away in handcuffs, their empires of influence crumbling. He also became, despite his discomfort with attention, a public figure. He gave interviews to journalists working on long-form investigations into systemic corruption. He spoke at conferences about ethics and whistleblowing. He collaborated with anti-corruption non-profits, helping them understand how to detect financial irregularities in public contracting and political finance. His daughter, who had initially been confused and frightened by her father's sudden notoriety, gradually became proud. "My dad helped put bad guys in jail," she told her friends, and Marcus could hear the respect in her voice when they talked on the phone. His relationship with the Arizona Biltmore remained complicated. The resort formally terminated his employment as expected, but after the trials concluded and the media attention faded, the general manager reached out personally to apologize. "You put us in an impossible position," the manager said over coffee, "but you also did the right thing. I hope you understand we had to protect the business, but I want you to know that I respect what you did." Marcus accepted the apology, though he never returned to the resort as a guest. The memories of that night, the fear, the adrenaline, the weight of the decision were too visceral, too immediate. Suite 2801 had been renovated and reopened after the FBI released it as evidence. But Marcus had heard they'd changed the number to Suite 2901, quietly trying to distance the space from its infamous history. 2 years after that night, in September, when he first entered the suite, Marcus received an unexpected package at his apartment. It came from the Arizona State Archives, forwarded through the U.S. Attorney's Office. Inside was a letter and a small metal plaque. The letter explained that the Arizona Historical Society, in conjunction with state government offices, had decided to create a small memorial installation at the Arizona Biltmore to commemorate what they were calling the Elliot Carver Confession and its impact on Arizona politics and justice. The installation would be placed in the resort's main lobby, a brass plaque and a small display case containing replicas of some of Elliot's letters. The originals were sealed as evidence explaining the history of Suite 2801 and the corruption it had helped expose. The letter asked for Marcus's approval to include his name in the installation, recognizing his role in bringing the confession to light. There was a draft of the proposed plaque text. This memorial honors the legacy of Elliot James Carver, 19562-024, whose posthumous confession from Suite 2801 exposed 2 decades of corruption and led to the largest political reform movement in Arizona history. It also recognizes Marcus Richardson, whose integrity and courage ensured that Carver's confession did not die in silence. Sometimes the truth waits in unexpected places for someone brave enough to find it. Marcus stared at the text for a long time, his emotions complex and tangled. Part of him wanted to refuse, wanted to insist that he didn't deserve recognition for simply doing what anyone should do. But another part, the part that had grown through this experience, that had learned something about justice and responsibility, understood that the recognition wasn't really about him. It was about creating a public reminder that ordinary people in ordinary moments have the power to change systems that seem immovable. He wrote back, giving his approval, and 3 months later attended the small ceremony when the memorial was unveiled in the resort's lobby. Standing in that grand space, surrounded by the Art Deco elegance that Frank Lloyd Wright had influenced, Marcus listened as the U.S. attorneys spoke about justice and accountability. He watched hotel staff and guests pause to read the plaque, saw their expressions change as they learned about the suite upstairs that had held such an extraordinary secret. But the detail that Marcus found most meaningful wasn't the plaque or the display case or the ceremony. It was something he learned afterward, talking with the resort's current operations manager. "We kept one thing from the original suite," the manager told him quietly. "When we renovated, we replaced almost all the furniture and fixtures. But there was one item that felt important to preserve. Come with me." Marcus followed the manager through back corridors and service elevators up to the 29th floor, which had previously been the 28th before the renumbering. They stopped outside what was now Suite 2901, and the manager used his keycard to let them in. The suite had been completely transformed. New color scheme, new furniture, modern technology, all traces of its former incarnation erased, except for one detail. On the bedside table in the master bedroom sat the old disconnected telephone, the beige rotary dial phone that had held the key to Elliot's safe deposit box. It wasn't plugged in. It would never carry a conversation. It simply sat there, preserved as a monument. "We added a small placard," the manager said, gesturing to a brass plate mounted on the wall above the table. Marcus stepped closer to read it. "This telephone sat in Suite 2801 for 20 years, disconnected and silent, holding the key to a confession that would change Arizona history. It remains here as a reminder that sometimes silence carries more truth than words, and that objects can bear witness when people cannot. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. He reached out and touched the telephone, his fingers brushing over the rotary dial that Elliot must have touched when he placed the key beneath it more than 20 years ago. It was absurd, really a broken telephone preserved as a memorial, but it was also perfect. Elliot had spent 2 decades paying for a suite where no one stayed, maintaining a confessional where no words were spoken aloud. The disconnected telephone was the perfect symbol of that strange, lonely, expensive act of conscience. "Thank you," Marcus told the manager, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for keeping this." Standing there in that renovated suite, touching that disconnected telephone, Marcus thought about Elliot James Carver, the man he had never met, but whose choices had completely altered the trajectory of his life. He thought about the complexity of human morality, about how people could be simultaneously cowards and heroes, criminals and confessors. He thought about how Elliot had spent 20 years living under a false name, working in a quiet library, writing his annual letters to no one, paying his monthly fees to maintain a space that existed solely as proof that he was sorry, that he knew what he had done was wrong, that he believed in justice, even if he wasn't brave enough to face it personally. And Marcus thought about his own journey from ordinary accountant to the center of a federal investigation, from someone who followed rules to someone who understood that sometimes following rules means breaking them, from a man living a life of comfortable mediocrity to someone who had glimpsed the machinery of corruption and helped dismantle it. In the 3 years since that September night, Marcus had worked on 17 federal corruption cases. He had helped secure 9 additional convictions. He had spoken at 12 universities and conferences about ethics in accounting and finance. He had co-written an op-ed series with the Arizona Republic about reforming campaign finance and government contracting processes. He had found purpose in work that mattered, that made a difference, that aligned with values he hadn't even known he possessed until they were tested. His daughter was 17 now, preparing for college, considering a major in criminal justice, because, as she told him with teenage certainty, she wanted to do what you do, Dad, but maybe more directly, his ex-wife had remarked, during a rare cordial exchange at their daughter's soccer tournament, that he seemed different, more confident, more present, more himself than she had seen him in years. "I think I am," Marcus had admitted. "I think finding that suite, making that decision, it changed something fundamental. I stopped living my life on autopilot. I started making choices instead of letting choices make me." Now, standing in suite 2901 with the disconnected telephone under his hand, Marcus understood something else. Elliot Carver's confession hadn't just exposed corruption. It had been a gift to whoever found it, a test, a challenge, an opportunity to choose the kind of person you wanted to be. Elliot had chosen wrong for decades, had chosen money and safety over justice and truth. But in his final years, he created an opportunity for someone else to choose differently. And Marcus had chosen well. "I should let you get back to your day," Marcus told the manager, stepping away from the telephone. "Thank you again for preserving this." As they walked back toward the elevator, the manager said, "You know, we get requests sometimes from guests who want to stay in this suite, specifically because of the history. They want to sleep where the confession happened, want to see the disconnected phone. We always tell them the story. Some people think it's morbid, but others, they get it. They understand that this place represents something important about conscience and redemption and the long arc of justice." Marcus nodded. Elliot once wrote in one of his letters that the suite was his anchor, the one thing that kept him tethered to his real identity, to the truth of what he had done. For 20 years, every payment was a heartbeat. Every month that passed without discovery was a breath. He paid $3 million for the space to exist where his confession could wait for someone to find it. And you found it. I found it, Marcus agreed. Or maybe it found me. I'm still not sure which. The elevator arrived, and Marcus stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. As the doors slid closed, he caught one last glimpse of the suite, where his ordinary life had ended and his meaningful one had begun. In the years that followed, Marcus Richardson continued his work with the U.S. Attorney's Office, eventually accepting a permanent position as a senior investigator in the Financial Crimes Division. He became known in law enforcement circles as someone with an almost uncanny ability to spot irregularities in accounting records, to follow money trails through complex networks of shell companies, to ask the right questions that unraveled carefully constructed frauds. He was, people said, the person you wanted on your case if you were investigating white-collar crime. He remained humble about his role in the Elliot Carver case, always insisting he had simply been in the right place at the right time, that any accountant would have noticed the same discrepancy. But those who knew him understood that wasn't quite true. Other accountants at the Arizona Biltmore had access to the same records, had seen the same line items for Suite 2800 1 year after year. But only Marcus had cared enough to investigate, had possessed enough curiosity and integrity to follow the thread wherever it led. The trials and convictions resulting from Elliot's confession led to sweeping reforms in Arizona's government contracting processes, campaign finance laws, and judicial oversight. New regulations required transparency in political donations, established independent review boards for public contracts, and created stronger protections for whistleblowers. These changes weren't perfect corruption like weeds, as a way of finding new paths to grow, but they represented genuine progress, a systematic attempt to prevent the kind of two-decade bribery scheme that Elliot had facilitated. Marcus's daughter graduated from high school and enrolled at Arizona State University, declaring a major in criminology. On the day he helped her move into her dorm, she told him, "You know, I used to be embarrassed that my dad was just an accountant. I thought it was boring, but now I get it. Numbers tell stories. Money reveals truth. What you did, finding those letters, making that call, that wasn't boring. That was everything." Marcus hugged her, his eyes stinging with grateful tears, understanding in that moment that one of the unexpected gifts of his choice had been showing his daughter what integrity looked like in practice, not just in abstract principle. On the 20th anniversary of the day Elliot had first reserved, Suite 2801, August 15, 2023, Marcus returned to the Arizona Biltmore for the first time since the trials had concluded. The resort held a small commemorative event, inviting him, several FBI agents who had worked the case, prosecutors, and representatives from anti-corruption organizations. They gathered in front of the memorial plaque in the lobby, and Marcus was asked to say a few words. He spoke about Elliot, the complexity of a man who had facilitated tremendous harm, but had also, in his own broken way, tried to make amends. He spoke about the disconnected telephone in Suite 2901, about how silence can sometimes speak louder than words. He spoke about the choice every person faces when confronted with wrongdoing, to look away and preserve comfort, or to act and accept uncertainty. 20 years ago, Marcus concluded, Elliot Carver signed a reservation form and made the first payment on a suite he would never visit. He began building a confession that would take 2 decades to complete. And 5 years ago, I walked into that suite and found letters with my name on them, offering me a choice: destroy the evidence and stay safe, or speak up and risk everything. I chose truth, and that choice, difficult and frightening as it was, turned out to be the best decision of my life. Not because it made me famous or successful, but because it aligned my actions with my values. Because it let me be the person I wanted to be, rather than the person it was easiest to be. That's Eliot's real legacy, not just exposing corruption, but challenging whoever found his confession to be brave enough to honor it. The memorial plaque in the Arizona Biltmars lobby stands today as a permanent reminder of Suite 2801's extraordinary history. Thousands of guests pass it each year, pausing to read about the accountant and the confession, about the disconnected telephone and the 20-year secret. Some dismiss it as a strange footnote, an interesting story, but others understand its deeper meaning, that justice often requires patience, that truth has a way of emerging even from decades of silence, and that ordinary people, in ordinary moments, have the power to change the world if they're willing to choose courage over comfort. The disconnected telephone remains on the bedside table in Suite 2901, preserved exactly as Eliot Carver left it. It will never ring. It will never carry a conversation. It sits there, silent and disconnected, a monument to a man's guilty conscience and his strange, lonely, expensive attempt at redemption. And perhaps that silence, that disconnection, is the most powerful message of all. Sometimes the truth doesn't need to be shouted. Sometimes it just needs to be preserved, protected, and waiting for someone brave enough to listen. If this story moved you as much as we hoped it would, please leave a comment sharing which moment resonated most deeply with your own experiences. Subscribe to our channel to follow more stories that touch the heart and challenge our understanding of justice, redemption, and the courage it takes to do the right thing when everything tells you to walk away. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to understand that in life, nothing is ever truly what it seems, and that sometimes the smallest choices, a decision to investigate an accounting discrepancy, a phone call made at midnight, can echo across decades and change everything.